All right, well, I think we are just about ready to get started here with today's webinar together between Encryption Consulting and Futurex on multi-cloud key management. We'll give people a few more seconds to hop in here and join in. We've still got a few people coming into the Zoom meeting, but while we're doing that, wanted to go ahead and just do a quick little introduction here and go over a few little housekeeping items as far as Zoom goes and everything like that. So today we're happy to be here talking about multi-cloud key management and BYOK and really the role that's playing in the overall crypto ecosystem these days and what organizations are using and looking at as they explore this topic. And so today, I'm happy to have been invited here by Puneet Singh, president of Encryption Consulting. He's also joining us here. My name is Adam Kaysen. I'm VP of Global and Strategic Alliances at FutureX. And, we're really just looking forward to having a fun conversation today. How's it going, Puneet?
Oh, thank you, Adam. Guys, let me give you a little bit background about myself. My name is Puneet, and I'm the founder of the Encryption Consulting LLC. And if we talk about what Encryption Consulting LLC does, we provide the consulting in the space of the encryption, tokenization, data masking, HSMs, and PKI. And we have been in the business for roughly 2.5 years, and we have been serving the Fortune 500 customers in this particular space, addressing the needs or the gaps which are there with respect to the encryption, as well as helping customers meet the different regulations such as PCI DSS, HIPAA, HITECH, GDPR, CCPA, NYDFS, to name the few. I'll pass it back to Adam. Adam, do you want to go ahead and give a little bit detail about Futurex?
Excellent. Thanks, Puneet. And as we're getting started here, just to do a quick little bit of housekeeping with Zoom. I know everybody at this point in 2020 is probably pretty familiar with it, but just for anybody who's not, we would love to answer any questions you have, either as we go or during a dedicated Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see a little button marked Q&A. And so in that, you can open that up and type in questions. We'll see those on our end, and then we can either jump into those as we go throughout the webinar here today, or we can handle them during the Q&A portion at the end. So by all means, don't hesitate to drop those in there. We like these when they tend to be a little more conversational, and don't hesitate to toss the tough ones at us here. And then this webinar is also going to be made available on demand following the presentation. So keep an eye out for that. And by all means, feel free to share it within your organization and with anybody else who might be interested. So let's go ahead and start with a little bit of background about FutureX. So like I said, my name is Adam Kaysen. I'm VP for Global and Strategic Alliances here at FutureX. I've been with the company about around 11.5 years or so. I started off on the technical side and then eventually moved on to the partner and alliances side eventually. And so our overall focus as an organization is on enterprise data security, specifically around FIPS 140-2 level 3 and PCI HSM validated cryptographic modules. So that takes the form of both hardware security modules and key management servers. And so within those realms, we do financial hardware security modules and general purpose hardware security modules. We've got a couple of different lines for those, both of which, however, can perform both financial and GP functionality. And then on the key management side, we have a focus on enterprise certificate authority and PKI, data protection to include file encryption, application encryption, database protection, as well as vaultless tokenization. And then code signing on top of that. All of these things revolve around the overall landscape of key management, which also includes what we're talking about today, which is cloud key management in a multi-cloud fashion, as well as BYOK, or bring your own key. We'll talk about what those are and really what the differences between those are. And then finally, just to round things out about FutureX and what we do, For our 40 years in business, for the majority of that, we have focused on-premises hardware. So we manufacture and design cryptographic modules, the network attached server enclosures they go into, and really provide everything start to finish on that. However, in 2015, we started reading the tea leaves in the market when it came to cloud-based cryptographic services and launched VirtueCrypt, which was at the time the industry's first and only cloud HSM service. And so what we've done with that, both on the general purpose and financial side, is focus on giving organizations a way to move their crypto infrastructure out to the cloud, both with our own private cloud offering with VirtueCrypt, but also with native integration with public cloud providers such as AWS, Azure, Google. And so really enough about us here, though. Let's get into the meat of what we're here to talk about today, which is cloud key management and BYOK. So where we're going to start here is giving some introductions to cloud key management. What is cloud key management? What is not cloud key management? How does BYOK, or bring your own key, fit into that? Talk about some of the features, benefits, prerequisites to enabling it, and then talk from a little bit more of a technical perspective about how it actually works, how it's implemented, what some of the specific use cases are, and then how the multi-cloud key management setup works in a Futurex system, and then also where Encryption Consulting comes in to actually help organizations figure out how best to deploy this. Because I will say that with the growing usage of key management and of data encryption out there, it's definitely not getting easier to architect these solutions. More and more applications are looking at consuming cryptographic resources. More and more use cases are emerging out there, both in-house as well as with cloud-based services. And so being able to implement and deploy that in a scalable and secure way is pretty important. And knowing that you're doing it right from the start is another key part. So to start out talking about cloud key management, what is it, right? And so the genesis of cloud key management came from the same foundational principles that led to enterprise key management in on-premises situations. Essentially, you have sensitive data that you need to protect, it needs to be encrypted, right? And so that need does not change whether it's on-premises or in the cloud. But one of the interesting things about how the public cloud providers, AWS, Google, Azure, have worked, as well as other public cloud providers as well, is that for them, running these services on their own cloud and offering it out to the end customer also puts them in control of the encryption keys used to protect those data, that data, whether it's in a database encryption situation or whether it's for VM encryption or any other use case. And so that particular aspect of it has resulted in some concerns. Essentially it allows or it forces customers to pass off control of their cryptographic keys to an external entity, the public cloud provider. And so that's something where BYOK has come in from that. And the main focus on that is allowing organizations to take advantage of cloud key management, but still allow them, the customer, to control the policies, the procedures, and how that's ultimately deployed. So looking first at BYOK, so what is BYOK? Well, as I mentioned, it stands for Bring Your Own Key. And this allows customers to provide their own keys to the public cloud providers to use. And there are a few different benefits to that, but mainly it's that the customer themselves manages that full cryptographic key lifecycle. So they control the method by which the keys are generated, which typically we're seeing more and more nowadays that organizations are using FIPS 140-2 level 3 validated entropy sources, such as an HSM, to generate those keys. That way you can have assurance that they're created in a compliant manner with sufficient randomness in the key generation process, not only for industries like financial services, where there are compliance requirements that mandate this, but also in general corporate ecosystems or healthcare or IoT device manufacturing, or a lot of different industries that are taking advantage of this technology, right? They want to control that method of creating the keys and then managing their life cycle. And so that also allows them portability. That lets them essentially take their keys and run. If they ever want to move to a different provider, whether they want to do something in-house, whether they want to transition to a different public cloud provider, this gives them the ability to do that, to be able to migrate those away. It also allows fulfillment of various policy compliance attributes. So for example, rotation period, algorithms used, validity period. We will talk a little bit in the future about about next generation crypto agility and how transitioning to new algorithms is becoming more and more important. But that's one of the foundational principles why organizations use this. And then finally, data residency legislation is another important one. We're starting to see this become more and more of an issue these days, whether it's GDPR, whether it's LGPD in Brazil, whether it's CCPA in California, which, a little bit of looking into my crystal ball here, but I imagine we'll be seeing something in the US that's a little more federally structured for data protection, and along with that, possibility of data residency requirements, which mandate that certain sensitive data components be kept within the geographic boundaries of a particular country. And so, for those reasons, BYOK emerged as a thing where cloud key management and the use of cryptographic data protection on the cloud can still have customer control over those keys. And so it's also important to talk about what BYOK is not. And so sometimes when people think BYOK, they think only the customer has visibility over the encryption keys. And that's not always true. The thing about BYOK is that you may manage the full key lifecycle on your own hardware. However, those keys still need to be provided to the cloud provider, where they can then take them, load them into their own key management system, and use them to encrypt data, sign data, do whatever it is that's required of them. And so the challenge involved in implementing BYOK is really interfacing with the individual cloud providers, because they do have different methods of doing it. For example, some cloud services only support derivation or wrapping keys. So for example, you generate a key to start, and then the cloud provider will actually derive from that the working key that's used to encrypt data. Others do it a little bit differently. And along with that, how you actually get the keys to the cloud provider differs based on who the cloud provider is. So some have different security levels, some have different mechanisms and tools. Quite often it's the responsibility of the vendor, namely Futurex in this scenario, to handle that interfacing. And so from a customer perspective, that's nice. It makes it a little bit easier in that they don't have to worry as much about it. But it is a fact of life that as new public cloud providers emerge, as new use cases emerge, there are different methods involved. And it's something that for the individual organization, when you're out there looking at how you implement and architect cloud key management, especially if you're looking at a multi-cloud ecosystem where you don't just want to use AWS, maybe you also want to share workloads with Azure or Google or IBM or anything like that. Or you want to use cloud services like Salesforce, for example, and have a cohesive multi-cloud integrated system there. Knowing that those methods are different is important, and knowing that you've got a vendor who will work with you on getting that set up is very important. So we've spoken a little bit about some of the different use cases so far for cloud key management, but I wanted to throw a few of them on the screen here that actually give specifics here for each of the three major public cloud providers here, AWS, Google, and Azure. And so with these are the types of services that they offer that integrate directly with their own cloud key management offerings, which then, whether you're doing BYOK, whether you're doing cloud key management in a multi-cloud environment, will then take and consume those here. So these are typically the types of services that you would see making use of the keys that are managed externally. Now that is actually, just going back real quick on that, it is important to know that list is far from exhaustive. And what we're finding is that the cloud providers tend to go key management native, where when new service types are offered, they are natively integrated with that. It's now just a core requirement that they have the ability for external key management there. I won't say that it's exclusively that way. There may be some scenarios where it's a little bit different, but it is becoming really the de facto standard there. So how cloud key management is implemented, you've got a few different prerequisites that we wanted to talk about today. So, first and foremost, the cloud provider has to support BYOK. And of course, that sounds like that's kind of the obvious one on here, but it really is worth mentioning, and especially for organizations that are early on in the process of architecting their multi-cloud environment. This is one of the things that you want to take into consideration, that you want to look at when you're making these decisions, is not only do they support BYOK, but how do they do it? What methods are they using? And does it fit with your overall long-term goals? And that's one of the areas in particular we're working with trusted advisors like Puneet, like with Encryption Consulting. They can help identify what some of those pitfalls are before you go too far down the line. Really having a plan to start is important. But secondly, the next prereq we have is that the external key management system has to integrate with the cloud provider. So that's something to check with the vendor themselves, find out what is required from that standpoint. Is there a particular platform they support for it? Is there a particular license that needs to unlock that functionality or make it available? And then what's their plan for integrating with other public cloud providers as well? What we see today is probably not necessarily the same mix of providers that we're going to see 5 years from now. And knowing that they've got a plan to expand out over time and integrate with those is important. And then finally, even if you're offloading key management to the cloud, even if you're running workloads in the cloud, if you're dealing with key management locally, whether it's on premises with an HSM that you manage yourself, or whether it's with an HSM service on the cloud, maybe a private cloud for that, it's still important to have those internal processes for key lifecycle management. So you need to know that you're generating them, rotating them, retiring them in a way that's consistent with your own policies and procedures. And for a lot of industries also meets compliance requirements as well. That's something very important there. And like I mentioned earlier, looking at country specific or region specific legislative requirements for data residency is also going to be important when it comes to that. So when you look at the main benefits of BYOK and cloud key management, these four are what we like to focus on and what we see organizations implementing this really laser in on. So first and foremost is cryptographic key portability. That level of comfort to be able to essentially pack up your keys and go home if you decide to switch providers or move from a sole source public cloud provider to a multi-cloud ecosystem. BYOK in large part and cloud key management enables you to do that. And so essentially it's a tool to eliminate vendor lock there. In addition to that, key lifecycle management, we've spoken about this a fair bit, so I won't drill in on it too much more, but key lifecycle management is important both for compliance, but also because it's just good security practice from a general perspective. Following that, disaster recovery, being able to know that no matter what, you have your keys, you're hanging on to them, you have the ability to go wherever you want with them. It really gives a good level of peace of mind and comfort from that standpoint. And then finally, auditing and reporting. When you're dealing with the compliance-driven ecosystems that many organizations are facing nowadays, or if you're just operating an enterprise environment where you need to have strong controls, which you should no matter what, whether you're small, large, in between, being able to pull reports of what keys you're using, what their utilization has been, rotation policies. One big one that we're seeing a lot of people get hit with is key and certificate expiry. Someone will create a key 90 days ago, a year ago, and then for whatever reason, they don't have the right policies in place, they don't have the right notifications set up, and then all of a sudden they have something expire and they have service outages and other things that cause real problems like that. Well, being able to plan for that with notifications, alerting, monitoring, as well as subsequent reporting is very important there. And so I want to talk a little bit more about data portability. That's probably one of, if not the most important aspects, and one of the reasons why people look at deploying BYOK for multi-cloud key management. And at the end of the day, it's the ability to shift from one cloud provider to another, or also bringing those workloads in-house. And I don't want to suggest it's an either or type scenario for that. Actually, a lot of organizations are looking at hybrid environments now, where maybe they run their primary workloads on premises and then they offload to the cloud for scalability, or maybe the opposite of that, or even just having the ability to have that type of hybrid ecosystem. That's very important, that flexibility these days. It is worth noting along with it that all public cloud providers do allow keys to be generated and maintained in their own vaults, but none of them allow for export. And this is really the core purpose behind BYOK, is saying, hey, rather than use the cloud provider's keys that they generate on their own, and most of them do generate them within HSMs, they don't allow them to export them. And so you're essentially vendor locked there. So when you're using BYOK, you have control over that, over those keys used for data and applications. So not only does that allow you to prevent vendor lock and be able to move as needed, it also, when you're talking about data decryption requests and things like that, it allows your organization to be the one responsible for that and for complying with the requirements, rather than the cloud provider making decisions on your behalf. So the greatest amount of flexibility really does come with BYOK and that cloud key management there. So next up, we're going to talk about multi-cloud key management in the Futurex ecosystem. And before we run into this, I did want to jump in and do a quick little refresher for anybody who has joined since then. If you have any questions or anything like that, by all means, don't hesitate to drop them in the Q&A portion of Zoom, and we can get to those either now as we go, or we can hit them right in a few minutes during the Q&A portion of this. But let's go ahead and talk real quickly about how Futurex handles BYOK. And so we've got two methods for doing that. One is with our on-premises hardware, which is the KMIS Series 3. And this is for organizations that want to deploy and manage this themselves. So this is a FIPS 140-2 level 3 and PCI HSM validated piece of hardware. It's a network appliance that customers will manage on their own. This particular piece of hardware handles everything from enterprise key management to BYOK and cloud key management, CA and PKI, data protection, vaultless tokenization, code signing, a number of different things, which positions it, for more of a crypto as a service internal to an organization enabler. Now, a lot of organizations these days are looking at deploying that, and we'll talk about that in another couple of minutes here. But the other way that we offer BYOK and cloud key management is through our cloud-based crypto as a service offering, which is VirtuCrypt. And so with VirtuCrypt, we offer a handful of different data centers out there, a number of which are co-located alongside major public cloud providers as well for low latency connectivity there. And so we allow you to push out that BYOK functionality and that cloud key management functionality to our cloud as well, where you still own and manage your own keys, but you don't have to manage workloads on premises. So for a true cloud migration strategy, that's one of the things that many organizations are turning to. Now, from a technical perspective, how the workflow goes, I wanted to start with just AWS. Now, I mentioned earlier that each public cloud provider is different. They do things a little bit differently, but overall, the process is relatively similar. And so without going into each one of them in detail, wanted to just show the workflow for AWS here. And so the way it works is you start by creating a CMK container on the AWS KMS service. So you essentially create that first within AWS, and then at the same time, you go back to your KMS, either on-premises hardware or the cloud service, and you set up a profile. You define that, you get the public key from the cloud provider, and then you create the key that's then sent out to the cloud. You wrap that with the RSA public key, send that back to AWS, where it'll be imported unwrapped, and then saved out as an individual AES 256 key there. So for AWS, that's at a very high level how the process works. For anybody interested in seeing it in more detail, we'd be happy to set up a demo to walk through it and show in a live environment how cloud key management for AWS works. But for the other cloud providers as well, it's a relatively similar process. So one other area we wanted to talk about along with that is key rotation and crypto agility, how you can deal with transitioning keys both to new ones over time as well as new algorithms. And this is something that with a lot of the interest we've been seeing in the post-quantum transition these days, whether it comes in 2 years, whether it comes in 5 years, whether it comes further out from that, moving from legacy crypto algorithms, RSA, ECC. It feels funny to call them legacy at this point, but that's how it's looking it's going to be down the road. Moving from, I guess a better word for it is conventional crypto algorithms to post-quantum crypto algorithms is important. And so finding a cloud key management solution that supports crypto agility is vital for that. Crypto agility meaning the ability to transition to new algorithms without completely ripping down your infrastructure and rebuilding it. Planning for that from the start is very important and is something that is not only a function of the cloud key management and BYOK provider from a hardware or cloud perspective, but also from a consulting perspective, making sure that you know what things are going to look like in the future as best as you can figure it out, and then planning for that, and then putting that plan into effect. Next up, we've got multi-tenancy, and multi-tenancy is an interesting one right now, and that's how you can handle multiple workloads or multiple applications within a single crypto ecosystem. And so the way we handle that is through a hierarchical identity structure. We essentially allow individual identities to be created for individual applications, and each of those can be associated with their individual keys. And so those individual groups are separated, there's access control, and essentially what it means is no one application can have access to another application's keys without authorization. And so that workload separation is really important for that. And that actually brings me to a big trend we're seeing these days in the enterprise crypto world, and that is internal crypto as a service, where organizations are looking to rather than having independent stacks of HSMs and key management servers for individual applications, each of which that are managed by different teams and different people, often with varying levels of expertise. They're transitioning away from that, especially at the enterprise and tier 1 level. They're looking to have a single crypto management team, a single HSM team, a single key management team, and using things like multi-tenancy to partition out access for their applications to those cryptographic resources. And so, talking in detail about how Futurex handles that might be another conversation for another day for the sake of time. But one of the most important parts of that is the plan you develop and how you do that. And I know for Puneet and for Encryption Consulting, that area in particular is one of the things that they focus on a lot. And Puneet, do you want to share a little bit about your background and what you're seeing in that area?
Sure. So when we are seeing more of the financial institution interested in this crypto as a service, and we are helping a lot of companies in the space of the finance set up this crypto as a service. And normally whenever, as Adam was describing, whenever we talk about crypto as a service, the HSMs forms the base or the foundation over which the whole crypto as a service is built, because that helps the organization achieve FIPS 140/2 level 3 kind of a compliance/regulation. And over that, they build on the asymmetric side their PKI or the certificate management solution. And on the symmetric side, they can build the encryption, tokenization, and test data management framework. And they can expose to their organization the symmetric as well as asymmetric side APIs and certificates and everything. And similarly, this can be applied to the cloud as well. And that's what we are seeing, and we help the organization build that whole thing and set up the operating model as well as the KPIs to see that how better they are addressing the compliances as well as reducing the overall risk of the organization. Adam, do you want to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And that's a good rundown. And I can tell you from watching organizations deploy this type of technology over the years, if they try to go in and kind of DIY it, if they don't have a strong level of expertise, that's setting things up for complication. And so working with organizations like yours to help build a plan and help put that into effect is pretty important there. So I know we're coming right up on 11:30 here, so I wanted to wrap real quick here and just talk a little bit about the future and what we're seeing out there. And in main part, it's obvious at this point that the industry is trending towards giving their customers control over their cryptographic keys. That portability, that ability to set up multi-cloud ecosystems, that's there, that's done. There's no real debate over that. What we are seeing more of, though, and we're seeing this emerge in greater and greater volumes, is organizations that don't just want to generate the keys and manage the life cycle in-house. They actually want to be the only ones to hold those keys, or HYOK. And so we're seeing more and more of that where the cloud provider never even has visibility on those keys. Typically it's called EKM, or external key management there, where all of the key management is offloaded externally. And then we're not seeing as much of this yet, but what I expect we'll be seeing within the next year to 18 months is an even greater focus on BYOE, or bring your own encryption, where the actual crypto processing is also handled in-house, whether on premises or in a private cloud by the customer organization. And so, these are just a few things that we're starting to see these days, but I will say it's an exciting world we're in right now. This is a very fast moving industry. I think it's something where traditionally you look at a lot of enterprise IT fields as ones that don't move all that fast, but I am not seeing that in the enterprise cryptography and cloud services space. And so that's been pretty fun for us. And so, actually, this is my fault. I ran a little bit over as far as time in here, so we don't have as much time for Q&A now. However, for anybody who does have any that they'd like to follow up with, either with Puneet or with myself, our contact details are right here. We'd be happy to talk with you in more detail about any of the items listed here, talk more from a technology perspective or a business perspective, and just give a greater insight. But for now, we appreciate it. And Puneet, thank you for the invite here. This has been a pleasure as always.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Adam.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining today. Keep an eye out for the on-demand version soon, and you enjoy the rest of your day.
Have a great day, guys.